Alrighty, how you doing, folks? We're continuing our question. How do you start? And so we talked a little bit last time about starting with outreach and just how important that can be. Whether you are feeling called to the homeless, starting outreaches to them in the parks and in the places where the homeless are, under bridges, anywhere they are, or whether you're called to help the elderly and you're just starting to do outreaches in nursing homes and do evangelists of them. Some of you may be called to help with human trafficking, and certainly starting in the streets, starting in the massage parlors and the different areas where the victims of trafficking are being exploited in your community, or foster care. Maybe you feel called to foster care, and that's starting with whatever state agency houses the kids, or there are group homes that you can minister to kids in those settings as well. So starting with outreach is always a no-brainer. It's not easy, but it is certainly, compared with going out and raising money and getting a building, it's certainly the easier of the two, and you get some amazing experience doing what you're doing. You'll get your name out there as someone who is able to help, and these are all things that go a long ways when you're ultimately fundraising and doing things. But the second part of this question, if you're at a point where you're ready to start housing people, actually think of the magnitude of the statement. You're moving people in with you into your building, into your home, your place, and you're going to start being responsible for all of their food, their clothing, their breakdowns, their building ups, and everything else that happens. It's an immense undertaking, but invariably most Dream Centers move from an outreach and awareness and advocacy and training sort of a mode. They move into a housing sort of a mode. That's kind of the goal of many of the Dream Centers. And so, well, we've seen Dream Centers do it about as many different ways as there are Dream Centers. We've seen Dream Centers do kind of the traditional model, which is work with their church or with a government entity or a private owner and actually get a whole building. Like old hotels seem to work pretty good for the work that we do. Old hospitals, old nursing homes, we've seen that happen before. But any place that has kind of some of your more fundamental things that you need bathrooms, right? No brainer. Showers for people, whether that's in each room or communal style. You need kitchens, places to do laundry. Typically, these are the things you need. Classroom space, and then bedrooms, places where they can sleep. Now, you don't have to go full on to where people eat there. There are a couple Dream Centers who they provide housing, and that's what they provide. And then all those other things are partnered up with other agencies, or they get food on their own. Some of that. One of the Dream Centers here in Phoenix is just not just, it's a lot of work, but it's a shelter, and so it's hot in the cot. It's you get a meal at night. You come in about 6-7 o'clock at night. You get a meal that night. There's a little devotional service. You sleep there, and then you're out during the day, and you're out presumably looking for work, going and going to other places to get the other type of help that you need. And so a lot of ways that you can start. We've seen Dream Centers start with bigger buildings like that. We have seen a couple Dream Centers build from the ground up, which, I mean, that's probably primo if you have the church or the resources or the grant to truly be able to build it from the ground up and plan and strategize. I mean, that's primo. Most Dream Centers are retrofitting our services into existing or pre-existing buildings, which is a good model. It can work really well. On the smaller scale, we've seen Dream Centers be a part of houses, and so houses that are larger or smaller. There's a Dream Center in Hawaii that it was a woman's home that she opened up. She got it licensed through their licensing to take in juveniles, and she was serving girls coming out of human trafficking in her home. She had like a 5-bedroom home, a bigger home, and so she was able to serve them directly in her home. We've seen some Dream Centers that had trailer parks, or that were like a trailer in a park, and they were kind of like expanded housing type stuff. So they're kind of like traditionally they would be called halfway houses and work programs. and different things like that. That certainly has worked, all the way down to we've seen some dream centers who made arrangements. This was an interesting idea. Made arrangements with hotel owners that on the weekends they were going to go out and do outreach, and it starts with outreach, right? And they were going to minister to human trafficking survivors, and they would like the option to offer them to come to that hotel, stay completely free of charge. They would have a person, a female, stay with them and do the case management to make sure. And so the hotels always had rooms. They were undersold, and they were willing to work with those dream centers, and that worked out pretty well. Now, when it comes to acquiring your building, we've seen some very creative ways that dream centers have been able to, including us, been able to get their building. I think traditionally, what we see is there's a building, right, and there's an asking price for that building, and you get with the owner and explain kind of what you're trying to do, what you're hoping to do, process-wise, and you try to find that rock bottom price for what it is. You get that with whoever your fundraising team is, or however you're going to raise the money. Maybe it's your church going to do a capital campaign, and you just talk feasibility. So in one sense, you're looking at is it even feasible financially for us to do this? Do we want to go the route of a loan? Will the owner do some sort of a lease to pay or rent to purchase type of an agreement? You work through all those different things, but figuring out if it's even feasible for you to do financially is one of the first steps. But in conjunction with that, you're also at some point going to need to get permission from some entity in your city in the form of a permit. Usually it's down at your city hall or your courthouse, wherever that is, that issues zoning and permitting. And so there's a couple things with that. One is the zoning, and so most cities, especially larger cities, they have the city zoned out, mapped out, and so they've said, city council has said that only certain activities can occur within certain zones. So in some zones, it can only be residential, which is a house and families and things like that. And some areas are zoned commercial, and so it's just retailers and commercial buy and sell properties. Some areas are zoned industrial, and so it's there's hazardous chemicals and waste and whatever. Factories that are burning stuff and just different things. And so depending on the zoning, that's kind of your next step, is to find out what it's zoned. Most cities will have some sort of a county assessor's website where you can go and find out if it's zoned or how it's zoned. Boy, traffic is thick here in Phoenix. I may be doing like 3 or 4 of these test podcasts today. That'd be great. Sure, go ahead. Why not? One more person. Get right in there. Let's go. Come on. You can do it. Get in there. Okay. So figuring out zoning kind of happens parallel in conjunction with your fundraising sort of a plan and a need. After zoning and fundraising is permitting. Next is on to your permitting for our site here in Phoenix. We have 7 different permits right to us, and we'll walk you through what all those permits are. But there is a boarding home permit, which is kind of the big one. There is a county health department. They have permits for operating the kitchen. There are hydrotherapy permits. You have to have permits to do baths and things like that. Then there are air quality permits, because we have burners and things that heat up the hot water and do different things. And so the operating permits are not a lot, a couple $1,000s a year for our main site here, but it is something. When you get into serving juveniles, whole nother level as far as permitting goes. Zoning is still kind of the same, but permitting is a whole nother thing, and it's not as much permitting. It is permitting, but then you get into this thing of licensing. So you need to be zoned. The property needs to be zoned correctly, or in the correct zoning. The property then needs to have the correct permitting to do the activities there, and then if you're doing minors or charging insurance contracts or things, then you're into this thing called licensing. And so licensing is a heavy undertaking. One of our sites here in Phoenix, has 3 different licenses to serve juveniles, to serve minors, and I'll tell you, just one of those applications, because I did it, was 180 pages, and it was a mammoth undertaking for us to get that license. But it can work. So those are some of the steps you have to take just to even open the door. Now, some challenges along the way, because it does go as planned sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. For example, here in Phoenix, we found the property 12 years ago. We found a great property, and it was zoned correctly, but we could not get it permitted. We're dealing with this almost exact same situation with a property up in northern Arizona. We got the property, we got the zoning, but then now we're coming to the permitting and the licensing, and the state is looking at things like, well, let's talk about Phoenix. So the state looked at our building and said, you're no longer grandfathered in for the fire code. You're going to have to put sprinklers throughout this whole building. And we're like, well, that's going to cost as much as the whole building costs. Like, to retrofit that into this, it's just not even doable. And so we were really in a pickle. And so we're in that same situation right now with the property up in northern Arizona. Now, both of these properties, neither one of them, according to our attorneys and our fire code experts, neither one of them were threats. It wasn't like they're, just about ready to, burn or anything. But because permitting had changed since the property had been built, we were being asked to upgrade. So in both cases, because it was safe and safe to do so, we were able to get a variance from the city council and from the city planning office. And so a variance is when you ask the city for a variant interpretation of the licensing or permitting requirements for your property. And so for us in Phoenix, our property is essentially it's a 4-story building, but there are no 2x4s in the walls or drywall. It's all concrete, and so that we felt was justification for applying for this. And so kind of where we landed was, we said, okay, we'll put some risers in, some fire code. I bring up fire code because it's honestly one of the top things that I get calls on every year from Dream Centers is, how are we going to do the sprinklers? How are we going to do the fire code? And so fire code is one of those that we've gotten variances on before. If you can't get a variance, then it's a fundraising project. If that's the property that you want, that's really all there to it. That's all there is to it. So once you've got the property though, and you've got the permitting and the licensing, it's time to start serving some people and start moving some people in. I'm not saying that we've always waited to get permitting, but I know, like, for our property up in northern Arizona right now, the state allows us to serve 4 households unrelated at any given time before permitting, and so they're working with us. And I know a lot of states do that as well. So you can kind of get your feet wet. And I want to say 4 families doesn't sound like much in that particular community. It's an old FLDS polygamous community. So 4 families up there is like 60 people. So that's pretty big. That's pretty big for us. So we're serving people. Then comes to program development. Check out our podcast on program development, where we talk about DOE, design of experiment. How do you design programs? How do we walk through and perfect our programs and different things like that? But this topic is just about getting started. So once you've got the building, though, it's time to start to turn things on and get things cooking. Literally cook a lot of food for people and start helping and serving people. So that's how a lot of our Dream Centers have gotten things started. We are more than happy to walk with you and help you with that. I think, I know that you just being able to use the Dream Center name, we're going to kick it in gear here. You've been able to use the Dream Center name to go to your town or your municipal center has been extremely powerful for Dream Centers all across the world to be able to do that. So the Dream Center, Pastor Matthew and Pastor Tommy and Pastor Luke, they have done an outstanding job of building a Dream Center, a global brand, and that brand carries with it a lot of great benefits. One of those is you appear to be a part of a family, and you are a part of a family, a larger family that's been there before, done that, and it is a good name. So contact us if we can help you, either getting started with your outreaches, or if we can help you with that next step, a building. That's how you get started. God bless you. Bye-bye.